2 days after the oncologist looked me dead in the eye and told me I had stage 3 cancer, my wife slid a pristine, perfectly pressed stack of divorce papers across our kitchen table. She didn't even have the decency to flinch. "I deserve a future," she said, her voice as cold and sterile as the hospital room I had just left. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. "You don't have one. I wish I could tell you that I flipped the table. I wish I could say I unleashed the temper that my years in military logistics and combat engineering had buried deep inside me. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the steam rising from my black coffee until it vanished into the cold morning air. It is funny how the human brain processes absolute betrayal. You notice the most insignificant details when your entire world is being violently ripped apart. The coffee was getting cold. The antique clock ticking above the stove sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's lawnmower roared to life, a stark reminder that for the rest of the world, this was just another beautifully mundane Saturday morning. But for me, it was the exact moment my marriage, and the woman I thought I knew, died. My name is David. I was 58 years old, living a seemingly quiet life in a suburban neighborhood that smelled of freshly cut grass and weekend barbecues. For 23 years, Lisa and I had built what I believed was a solid, unshakable foundation. We had a 3-bedroom house, with a mortgage I was methodically paying down, Friday night pizza traditions with our 11-year-old daughter Emma, and a life that felt safe. I wasn't driving a luxury sports car, but I was a senior structural engineer and logistics architect for a massive supply chain firm. My entire career was built on identifying structural weaknesses, anticipating failures before they happened, and reinforcing the foundations. I spent decades fixing problems that no one else even realized existed. But I had completely missed the structural rot in my own home. For the past 5 years, every single night after Emma went to bed, I had retreated to my basement office. I wasn't just tinkering. I was meticulously coding a military-grade, AI-driven logistics and warehouse management software. It was an absolute beast of a system, built from the ground up using the tactical deployment algorithms I had developed during my time in the service. It was my retirement dream, a quiet project I believed would eventually set my family up for generations. Lisa hated it. She called it my little hobby, a pathetic excuse for a man who wasn't aggressive enough to climb the corporate ladder and bring home the 7-figure bonuses her friends' husbands flaunted. I never imagined I would need that software just to survive. 2 days earlier, I had walked into the oncology ward, expecting the doctor to prescribe a routine minor surgery to remove a benign growth. Instead, Dr. Patel, a man whose face had seen too much tragedy, pulled his chair uncomfortably close to mine. "I wish I had better news," he said softly. No man ever forgets the exact cadence of those words. He laid it all out with clinical precision. It was an aggressive strain. It required immediate, invasive surgery followed by a brutal regimen of chemotherapy. The odds weren't a death sentence, but they certainly weren't a guarantee of old age, either. "If we move aggressively, right now you have a real fighting chance," he had told me. A fighting chance. I was an ex-military engineer. I knew how to fight. I knew how to dig trenches and hold the line. I drove home that afternoon, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, silently preparing a battle plan. I stupidly assumed my wife would be standing beside me in the trenches. I could not have been more catastrophically wrong. She waited until Emma had gone upstairs to do her homework. Then she walked into the kitchen, her posture rigid, her face an unreadable mask of calculated indifference. "I've been thinking," she started. Whenever a manipulator starts a sentence with those 3 words, you know the knife is about to drop. "I can't do this, David." "Do what?" I asked, genuinely confused, my mind still foggy from the medical terminology bouncing around my skull. "This," she waved her perfectly manicured hand dismissively toward me, as if I were a stain on the rug. "The endless hospital visits, the treatments, the smell of sickness, watching you decay. I am not spending the best years I have left playing nurse to a sinking ship." I blinked, processing the absolute cruelty of her words. I thought for a fleeting, naive second that she was just terrified. Panic makes people say terrible things. I reached my hand across the oak table, seeking any shred of connection. "We will get through it, Lisa. I'm not giving up." She immediately yanked her hand away. Repulsed. "No." Her voice was terrifyingly calm. There was no hesitation, no sorrow, no fear, just cold, hard calculation. "You might get through it, or maybe you won't, but I am not wasting my time finding out." That was when she slid the thick manila envelope toward me. Divorce papers. They weren't freshly printed. They were already signed, notarized, and legally binding. I stared down at my own name typed neatly on the first page. "You already planned this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just told you about the diagnosis 2 hours ago." She let out an exasperated sigh, crossing her arms. "David, I've been thinking about this for months. Your little hospital call just finalized the timeline." "That's enough. I want out." I actually laughed. Not because anything was remotely funny, but because the human brain occasionally short-circuits when confronted with pure, unfiltered evil. "What about us? What about our life?" "What about Emma? I'll help out financially with her expenses," she replied smoothly, already having the script memorized. "You mean you'll stay to raise her?" I pressed, the realization dawning on me. Silence stretched across the kitchen. Then she delivered the fatal blow, the words that would echo in my mind for years, fueling every late-night coding session, every agonizing hour of chemotherapy. "I deserve a future, David. You don't have one. And I am certainly not dragging my life down to raise a child while taking care of a ghost." It felt as though a combat knife had been driven directly through my ribs. I wasn't dead. The doctors said I had a fighting chance, but to the woman I had slept next to for over 2 decades, I was already a corpse. She didn't see a husband. She didn't see a father. She saw a liability. The practical, emotionless negotiation began instantly. She wanted the divorce pushed through the courts with lightning speed. She didn't want the house. "You can keep the house," she offered generously, completely ignoring the fact that the bank still owned the vast majority of it. She didn't want primary custody of Emma, either. "A child needs stability, and I can't provide that while building my new life," she reasoned, her eyes devoid of any maternal instinct. I looked toward the staircase, my heart shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces. Emma was only 11 years old. She had spent the entire week making me get-well-soon cards for what we thought was a minor procedure. Now, in the blink of an eye, she was losing her mother, and staring down the barrel of potentially losing her father, too. Within 4 weeks, the divorce was brutally finalized. Lisa packed her bags and walked out the front door without shedding a single tear. She didn't even look back. The speed at which she executed her exit strategy was jarring. It was too efficient. My tactical background started sounding alarm bells in the back of my mind. People who run away out of sudden fear are messy, chaotic, and emotional. Lisa was none of those things. She was surgical. A few days after she left, while I was consolidating our remaining digital assets and untangling our shared bank accounts, I decided to run a deep diagnostic on our network history. I wasn't snooping out of jealousy. I was trying to secure our finances before the medical bills drowned me. What I found was a fatal mistake she had made. She forgot that she was married to a senior software architect who specialized in digital security grids. Buried deep in the deleted caches of our shared home server, I uncovered the real reason she had left so quickly. It wasn't just the cancer. The cancer was merely her convenient excuse, her golden ticket to play the overwhelmed victim to her social circle. She had been quietly siphoning funds from our joint savings into an offshore LLC for nearly 10 months. And she hadn't done it alone. She was having an affair with a man named Bradley, a flashy, loud-mouthed venture capitalist who drove a leased Porsche and wore suits that cost more than my first car. Bradley was the exact opposite of me. He was arrogant, heavily leveraged, and obsessed with appearances. I read their encrypted messages. They had been laughing at me. Bradley had referred to me as the mechanic, mocking my humble demeanor and my endless hours working on my logistics software. Lisa had agreed, calling me a dead end long before I ever got sick. She didn't leave because she was scared of the disease. She left because she had monkey branched to a man she believed was her ticket to high society, stealing a significant portion of my hard-earned savings on the way out. I sat in the dark basement, the glow of the monitors reflecting in my eyes. A cold, terrifying calm washed over me. I didn't scream, I didn't smash the keyboard. The military teaches you that anger is a useless emotion unless it is focused, weaponized, and directed at the enemy with absolute precision. I made a silent vow, right? Then and there, I was going to survive this cancer. I was going to raise my daughter to be an absolute force of nature. And I was going to finish my software, not just to sell it, but to build an empire so massive that it would cast a shadow over everything Lisa and Bradley ever tried to accomplish. I was going to let them think they had won. I was going to let them enjoy their stolen victory. Because a true predator doesn't roar before it strikes. It moves in absolute silence. The very next morning, the real war began. If you have never gone through military-grade chemotherapy, I hope you never have to experience it. People love to give you unsolicited advice and tell you what it's going to be like. They tell you about the crushing nausea. They tell you your hair will fall out in clumps on your pillow. They tell you about the bone-deep exhaustion. All of that is entirely accurate. But what they fail to mention is how much you begin negotiating with yourself over the most pathetic, trivial things. Can I make it through one more hot shower without having to sit down on the tiles? Can I drag the laundry basket up the stairs without my vision going black? Can I force myself to stay awake just long enough to help my daughter with her middle school math homework? Those tiny, insignificant tasks became my daily battlegrounds. They became my victories. The first few rounds of treatment weren't apocalyptic. But by the fourth week, the chemicals caught up with me. Food lost all flavor, turning into a tasteless paste. My morning coffee tasted like rusty metal. The nerve damage kicked in, rendering my fingertips entirely numb. Some mornings, I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror for 20 minutes, struggling just to button my dress shirt because I couldn't feel the plastic beneath my fingers. I remember laughing a dark, cynical laugh one morning as I wrestled with a sleeve. "Well, David," I muttered to my reflection, "you survived combat zones in the Middle East, and now you're officially getting your ass kicked by a cotton shirt." Emma heard me from the hallway. She peeked her head around the doorframe, her bright eyes assessing the situation. "Who won?" she asked. "The shirt," I admitted, defeated. She smiled a sad, knowing smile, walked over, and calmly buttoned it for me. "Want me to help?" she asked. Already doing it, that single, tiny gesture of unconditional support carried me further than any cocktail of painkillers the hospital could prescribe. Life settled into a strange, brutal routine. Every other Tuesday, I would drive my beat-up 12-year-old Honda Accord to the James Cancer Hospital long before sunrise. The chemo usually took most of the morning, sometimes longer if my white blood cell count was dangerously low. I would come home entirely depleted, feeling like a hollowed-out shell. Emma, at only 11 years old, had already memorized the entire routine. She would quietly leave the television off. She would make herself a peanut butter sandwich if I was passed out on the couch. By her 12th birthday, she had learned how to microwave soup without burning it, scramble eggs, and pack her own school lunches. No child should ever have to learn those survival skills simply because a parent is fighting for their life. Yet she never complained. Not once. She stepped up like a seasoned soldier, taking command of a compromised unit. Money quickly became the second front in my war. Even with excellent corporate insurance, the bills flooded the mailbox faster than I could process them. Hospital copays, specialized prescription costs, follow-up MRI scans, physical therapy. Every single trip to the mailbox felt like opening a fresh, tactical problem I didn't have the resources to solve. To keep us afloat, I picked up remote consulting work whenever I felt physically capable of staring at a screen. Some nights, I would review complex software architecture for logistics companies in Texas or Colorado until past midnight. Other nights, I simply stared at the monitor, my brain refusing to cooperate due to the heavy brain fog induced by the medication. but the unfinished warehouse software. My secret weapon sat patiently on my second monitor, waiting. Sometimes I would open the source code, write one line of logic, fix one minor bug, and then forcefully close it 20 minutes later because I was too exhausted to think straight. More than once, I almost deleted the entire repository. One bleak November afternoon, I received a cold email from a mid-sized logistics company based in Indiana. They had heard rumors in the industry about the system I was building and offered to buy the source code outright. They weren't offering millions. They weren't even offering enough to change my life. They offered $40, 7 brutal years of late-night coding, military-grade algorithmic design, and sacrificed weekends for less than the price of a standard pickup truck. Part of me desperately wanted to accept the insult. $40,000 would immediately wipe out the looming medical debt. It would buy us breathing room. I printed the offer letter and left it on the kitchen island, staring at it while drinking a glass of water. That evening, Emma came home from school, dropping her heavy backpack on the floor. She immediately noticed the printed paper. She was far too observant for her own good. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up. "Someone wants to buy my software project," I replied tiredly. "Are you going to sell it to them?" "I don't know, Emma." She read the paper quietly for a full minute. Then she looked up, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that belonged to someone thrice her age. "Do you still believe in it?" I shrugged, rubbing my temples. "I'm tired, sweetheart. I didn't ask if you were tired." She fired back, cutting straight through my pathetic excuses. Kids possess a terrifying ability to slice through adult nonsense. She asked again, firmer this time. "Do you still believe in it, Dad?" I looked toward the hallway, leading to my basement office. The outdated computer rigs, the massive whiteboards covered in architectural diagrams, the thousands of hours I had poured into creating something revolutionary. "I think I do," I finally admitted. She slid the paper back across the counter toward me. "Then don't sell it just because you're scared." She turned and walked upstairs before I could formulate a response. I stood there in the silent kitchen for a long time. Then I picked up the offer letter and slowly, deliberately, tore it into tiny pieces. I threw them in the trash. I didn't do it because I suddenly felt a massive surge of confidence. I did it because I realized, with absolute clarity, that I would deeply regret quitting far more than I would ever regret struggling. While I was fighting for my life and building my software line by agonizing line, I kept tabs on Lisa and Bradley. It wasn't hard. They were incredibly obnoxiously public about their new high society life. Bradley's venture capital firm was riding a dangerous wave of over-leveraged investments, and he loved flaunting the illusion of immense wealth. Through a dummy social media account, I watched them attend lavish galas, sip champagne on rented yachts, and pose in front of exotic cars they didn't actually own. Lisa's posts were carefully curated to project absolute perfection. She would write long, philosophical captions about finding her true worth and cutting out toxic anchors. She was playing the brave survivor who had escaped a dead-end marriage to a boring, uninspired man. I never commented, I never reacted. I just took screenshots, cataloged them in a secure encrypted folder, and used my boiling anger as fuel to code late into the night. Every time the chemo made me want to quit, I looked at a picture of Bradley's arrogant, punchable face, and I kept typing. Winter arrived with a vengeance. Columbus got hammered with one brutal snowstorm after another. Our driveway disappeared under feet of snow every single weekend. Against my doctor's explicit orders, I would bundle up and shovel the concrete until my spine screamed in agony. Emma would always grab the smaller shovel and insist on standing right beside me. "You should be inside where it's warm," I told her, my breath pluming in the freezing air. "So should you," she shot back, tossing a spade of snow. "You've got school tomorrow, you've got cancer." It was incredibly hard to argue with that airtight logic. We both burst out laughing in the middle of a blizzard. The neighbors probably looked out their windows and thought we had completely lost our minds. But in that moment, I realized we were unbreakable. By my 6th year of working on the software, the tide finally began to turn. The cancer was officially in remission. My hair had grown back, albeit a bit thinner and entirely gray. I had finally launched the beta version of my system. I wasn't serving hundreds of clients, but I had enough local warehouse managers trusting my code to keep the lights on and allow me to quit my day job. I hired my first employee, a brilliant 32-year-old coder named Miguel, who was patient enough to decipher my complex military logic. Then, just when stability seemed within reach, disaster struck. Miguel walked into my office one Monday morning, his face pale. He dropped his laptop on my desk. Without a word, a major, heavily funded tech conglomerate had just announced a brand new warehouse management platform. The demonstration video playing silently on the screen looked violently familiar. They hadn't stolen my code line for line, but they had perfectly replicated my unique front-end workflow and logistical philosophy. And the worst part? The venture capital firm backing this massive corporate ripoff was none other than Bradley's firm. They were trying to crush me before I even got off the ground. Within 3 excruciating months, we lost 4 major clients to their aggressive, predatory pricing. Then 2 more. Our revenue plummeted by 40%. Making payroll suddenly became a terrifying, high-stakes game. I immediately stopped taking a salary to ensure Miguel and our small support staff got paid. I was ready to throw in the towel. I sat in my dark office on a Friday night, drafting an email to our remaining customers, formally announcing the closure of the company. It felt like total surrender. I was burying years of hope, but I never pressed send. When I got home, I collapsed at the kitchen table, looking completely defeated. Emma, who was now a sharp, highly observant 16-year-old, looked up from her chemistry textbook. "You look awful," she noted. "I think we're finished," I admitted, my voice cracking. I told her everything: the competitor, the stolen designs, the lost revenue, the shrinking bank account. I didn't tell her Bradley was behind it. I wanted to keep her out of the crossfire. She listened in absolute silence. When I finished, she simply nodded. "Did you already quit?" "No, good." That Sunday, Emma disappeared into her bedroom with her laptop for 6 straight hours. I assumed she was cramming for exams. I was entirely wrong. Without telling me, Emma had methodically tracked down the personal contact information of every single warehouse manager, logistics director, and military supply officer I had ever worked with over my decades-long career. These weren't strangers. These were hardened industry veterans who knew my reputation for absolute integrity. She didn't beg for money. She didn't ask for charity. She simply wrote a short, razor-sharp message. "My name is Emma. My father built this software from the ground up while fighting stage 3 cancer and raising me completely alone. A massive corporation is currently trying to bleed his company dry. If you are ever looking for a system built by someone who actually bleeds for his work, rather than a corporate board, I would appreciate you giving him one honest look." No emotional manipulation, just cold, hard facts. 3 weeks later, the phone in my office rang. A gravelly voice introduced himself as Ron Mercer, the owner of one of the largest independent logistics fleets in the Midwest. "I've heard highly verified things from people I trust with my life," Ron said bluntly. "I want to run a pilot program with your software, and if it works, I'm bringing my entire network with me." I treated that pilot program like a combat mission. Miguel and I practically lived in Ron's warehouses. We trained his staff, optimized his routes, and fixed microscopic bugs before they even registered on his dashboard. 6 weeks later, Ron called me back. "I've got 2 friends who need to talk to you immediately." Those 2 friends became massive enterprise clients. They introduced another, and another. The industry talk shifted rapidly. Warehouse owners don't trust slick corporate marketing videos. They trust results, and they absolutely hate seeing a hard-working man get screwed over by Wall Street suits. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were rapidly dominating the regional market, systematically stealing clients away from Bradley's heavily funded, bloated software company. His system looked pretty, but mine actually worked under heavy fire. We were preparing for a massive counter-offensive, and neither Bradley nor my ex-wife had any idea what was about to hit them. Almost 8 months later, a man in a sharp navy blazer walked into my small office. He introduced himself as Mark Ellison, a senior partner at a massive private equity firm in Chicago. I initially thought he was lost. "I think you have the wrong company," I told him. He smiled. A genuine predatory smile. "I absolutely do not. Your competitor. The one funded by venture capital's bleeding out. Their system keeps crashing. Yours doesn't. We aren't interested in how fast you grew. We are interested in the fact that your code is indestructible. And you have never lost a client." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You built a titanium fortress. We want to buy it." Negotiations took 6 grueling weeks. Lawyers picked apart every line of code, and accountants reviewed every transaction. They couldn't find a single weakness. On a hot Tuesday afternoon in July, I sat in a sleek conference room and signed the final acquisition papers. When my accountant called me 2 days later, his voice was trembling. "It cleared, David. It's in the account." I opened my secure banking application. The numbers on the screen didn't even register as real currency. It was $13 million. $13. My basement hobby, the project my ex-wife had endlessly mocked as a dead end. It had just secured my family's legacy. Forever. The local business journals caught wind of the acquisition. The narrative was too good to ignore. Local single father and cancer survivor sells tech startup for $13 million. I agreed to exactly 1 television interview to talk about resilience and Emma's unwavering strength. I never once mentioned my ex-wife. As far as public was concerned, she did not exist. But the universe possesses a highly evolved sense of poetic justice. While my company skyrocketed, Bradley's over-leveraged venture capital firm imploded. The competitor software he had backed was a catastrophic failure. When my system took over the market, Bradley's firm hemorrhaged clients. The financial dominoes fell. Within weeks of my payout, Bradley faced aggressive bankruptcy proceedings for gross financial mismanagement. His cars were repossessed, and right on cue, the ghost from my past appeared. I was trimming hedges in my backyard when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is this David?" It was Lisa. Her voice lacked its sharp, arrogant edge. She sounded exhausted. "I saw you on the news," she said softly. "I'm really proud of you." I let the silence hang, weaponizing it. "Thank you," I finally replied. "I've wanted to call you," she pushed, her tone desperate. "I was terrified, David. The cancer scared me. Leaving you was the biggest regret of my life." I listened without interrupting. When she ran out of breath, I delivered a calculated strike. "I appreciate the apology, Lisa. Have a good life." I ended the call and blocked the number. But starving predators don't give up easily. She started showing up at the fringes of my social circles, heavily implying to relatives that we were working things out. She was desperately trying to manufacture social pressure, hoping my family would guilt me into giving her another chance. Emma noticed the manipulation instantly. She walked into my office one evening, her eyes cold and calculating. "She's trying to force her way back in by using the family," Emma stated. "I know I'm ignoring it. Ignoring an infection just lets it fester," she countered sharply. "We need to cut it out completely, in front of everyone." I leaned back. "What's the plan?" "Let's host a massive barbecue. Invite the entire extended family. Make it a huge celebration of the buyout." She paused, a brilliant smirk crossing her face. "And invite her. Why invite the enemy inside the gates?" "Because," Emma whispered, "I want her to see exactly what she threw away. I want closure, and I want to watch her realize she has absolutely no power here anymore." I agreed. I spent the week prepping the backyard like a bunker. By Sunday afternoon, the yard was packed with over 40 people, laughing and celebrating. Then, an hour into the party, the backyard gate creaked open. Lisa stepped inside. She looked significantly older, worn down by Bradley's impending bankruptcy. She held a cheap container of potato salad, trying to project humility. A heavy, awkward silence ripped through the crowd. She walked directly toward me, forcing a fragile smile. "You look well, David. The house looks beautiful." "It's exactly how you left it," I replied, my voice cold steel. She glanced nervously around, realizing no one was rushing to welcome her back. Emma walked over, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. She didn't offer a hug or a handshake. She just stared at her mother with clinical detachment. "Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart," Lisa replied, her voice breaking. The words sounded violently unnatural coming from her. Lisa spent the next 2 hours desperately trying to insert herself into conversations. She didn't belong. Finally, she couldn't take the passive rejection anymore. She tapped a spoon against a glass, demanding attention. The music was turned down. 40 pairs of eyes locked onto her. She stood near the patio, tears welling in her eyes, a perfectly practiced performance. "I just want to say something," she announced, her voice quivering. "I made a catastrophic mistake years ago. I let fear dictate my actions. I was terrified of losing David. And I ran away. I have regretted it every single day." She looked directly at me. "I know forgiveness has to be earned, but maybe it is finally time for us to be a family again." Complete, suffocating silence dropped over the backyard. Every single person stared at me. I didn't say a word. I looked at Emma. She gave a microscopic nod, stepped forward, and took command of the battlefield. "Mom," Emma started, her voice completely devoid of anger, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "Can I say something?" Lisa nodded eagerly. "Of course, sweetheart. When Dad got sick, I didn't understand the medical terms. But I understood that you packed your bags and walked out." Lisa flinched. "Emma, I was scared." "No, you weren't," Emma interrupted, slicing through the lie. "I heard you in the kitchen. I heard you tell him that he didn't have a future. I heard you call him a dead weight." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Lisa's face drained of color. "And I also know about Bradley," Emma continued, dropping the nuclear payload. "I know you were siphoning money from Dad's accounts into an offshore LLC 10 months before he even got the diagnosis. I know you were sleeping with a venture capitalist and calling my father a mechanic behind his back." The silence in the yard was absolute. Lisa took a staggering step backward, realizing her entire narrative had just been publicly executed. "You didn't leave because of cancer," Emma stated relentlessly. "You left because you thought you were trading up. And now that Bradley's firm is bankrupt, you suddenly realized you backed the wrong horse. You aren't here because you love us. You are here because you need a bailout." Lisa was physically trembling. "David, please," she begged. Panicked, "Tell her to stop." I slowly walked forward. I looked at her with absolute pity. "7 years ago," I said, my voice echoing with finality, "you told me I didn't have a future. You told me I was a ghost." She nodded, tears streaming, unable to speak. "You were right." "Lisa," I unleashed the devastating blow. "I just didn't realize my future was going to be $13 million richer and completely free of you." I turned my back on her and walked away. Emma delivered the closing remarks. "Family isn't the person who promises they'll stay when things are easy. It's the person who stays in the trenches when life gets ugly. We survived without you, Mom. We thrived without you. You don't have a place here anymore. Please leave." Lisa stood there, completely shattered. There was no lie she could spin. The truth was out, and the trap had snapped shut. She slowly turned and walked out the gate. No one stopped her. She walked out of our lives, humiliated and financially ruined. I watched the gate click shut. Then, I looked at Miguel standing near the grill. "Think those steaks are ready?" I asked. Miguel grinned. "Perfectly seared, boss." The music kicked back on, the laughter resumed. Louder than before, the infection was gone. Years later, I used a portion of the buyout money to establish a massive scholarship fund for adults returning to technology careers after battling severe illnesses. I didn't do it for the tax write-off. I did it because I know what it feels like to fight a war in the dark. The absolute best future isn't the one someone arrogantly predicts for you. It's the one you stubbornly build, line by line, long after everyone else has stopped believing. And if someone stands beside you during the heaviest fire, you make damn sure you share the victory with them. I survived the cancer, I survived the betrayal, but watching Emma grow into an unbreakable woman, I realized something far more important. Raising her was my ultimate victory.